All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to MaxSold's Ask an Expert webinar series in honor of Move Managers this month and the NASM conference that's on the horizon coming up. We'll get started in just a few seconds while we let everyone on Facebook join. And it looks like we are live on Facebook, which is awesome.
Okay.
So we have Marty Stevens-Hebener here today, and we are excited to have her back. She's done a webinar with us before. Marty owns Clear Home Solutions in California. She is a move manager. She also is president of NASM, the National Association for Senior Move Managers, and the host of a podcast called How to Move Your Mom and Still Be on Speaking Terms. So we are super excited for her to be here today and talk about how to navigate some of those more challenging conversations with some more challenging clients that we may come across from time to time. So before we get started, we're going to launch a poll, and it would be great if you guys could participate. And please just keep in mind, put in the chat anything that you're wondering, or if I can answer for you, or anything you want to share. And our questions will be at the very end. So post your questions in the Q&A, please. What types of clients frustrate you the most? The ones who do not want to pay what you are worth, hypercritical clients, family feuds, all of the above, or other. And if you have an other, you're welcome to post it in the chat.
I wanted to vote. I was apparently panelists and the hosts are not allowed to vote. So, oh well. Oh, indecisive. Good point, Karen. Yeah, that can be very, very frustrating. It's so funny. Who's that from? Lauren. Lauren, that is so funny. I was just saying this yesterday to one of my wonderful project managers. I just said, I wish they would just let us do our job. This is why they hired us, right? We know what we're doing. Would you tell a plumber what to do? Well, maybe some people would, but. Oh, now we're really getting some. Yep. All of the above. Yep. They're all tough. They're all tough. The ones that drive me the most have crazy, the ones that make me craziest, Heather, are the ones that just are hypercritical. Because I just really feel for my staff because I know how good they are, and if you're a solopreneur, you know that you know your stuff. And it's just frustrating because, and I'll say this in the presentation, it's not about your work. It's really about something else that's going on in their lives, but they're just putting it all on you. That's frustrating. Yes, clients who refuse to listen to us, right, Jennifer? Yep. Mackenzie, so I can relate to all of these. I mean, really, I probably would have answered all of the above because they're all frustrating. These are great responses. Thanks, you guys, for participating. This is great. Oh, look, it's really interesting. Yeah, who won't pay you what you were? I know. They think, you should, you and or your staff should do this for minimum wage. And I'm sorry, but we are specialists and they don't appreciate that. All the above. That's the winner, right, Heather? That's the winner.
Yeah, all the above. Thank goodness we have patient move managers out there.
Ooh. Yeah. Yeah. Patience is what it's all about. All right. Shall I get into it? Up there. Hello. I am the speaker now. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm honored you're here. And I'm so honored to be your presenter. I'm going to, Heather, can you let me screen share, please? It says I'm not allowed to screen share yet. Or maybe Cesar. Cesar's behind the scenes. We can't see him, but he's running this brilliantly.
You have screen sharing.
There we go. I can do it now. And I'm going to optimize. Oh, okay. So we're going to do, there we go.
So if you need me.
all good. And pardon me, you're seeing me behind the scenes now. Now let me run my slideshow. There we go. That's what I want to see. Okay, so I'm going to minimize you and I on the side. All these things we have to adjust when we're presenting. All right, so this is all about challenging clients, how to keep the peace, and above all, keep them moving forward through the project, because that's what they brought you on for. And that's really our mission, right? Is to really serve our clients through this incredibly difficult time, even when they're getting in the way. And by the way, I just want to say I'm so honored to be presenting with MaxSold, because we work with them frequently at Clear Home Solutions, and it's just a magnificent platform. All right, let's dive in, and it's not letting me. Okay, sorry. Sometimes Zoom is like that, you know? All right, so there are different categories of challenging clients. The main category, I think, that we really run into, and that's particularly difficult, is the families that are at war with one another. It can be sibling rivalry. We deal with that a lot, but also it can be intergenerational between the parents and the kids. Because sometimes, like, for example, if you're doing move management to an assisted living community, oftentimes the parent or parents are reluctant while the kids know it's best for them, or vice versa. The parents really want to move, but the kids don't want them to because they don't want them to sell the house or something like that. And then next is clients at war with you and your company. Very unpleasant, very, very unpleasant, especially if it gets legal. Hoarding and other difficult circumstances that we simply walk into, and it's a difficult environment that in some cases requires special training, and then sometimes it's just it's managing your own shock and surprise and keeping your poker face on. One of the things to keep in mind with really challenging clients, especially if they just give you a hard time and your staff, is what's the value of your sanity? So let's do a poll right now. We're going to do a poll about whether you have actually fired a client. I'm going to stop sharing so we can do that. Let's do that poll about if you've ever actually fired a client, because I've fired a few. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years. And sometimes you just have to say goodbye in careful ways. I mean, the ways that I will often do it, it's often hypercritical clients. I mean, if they're not paying, it's really obvious. It's like, until we get paid, I'm so sorry, we can no longer work with you. If they are just hypercritical and it just can't be satisfied, then I'll say something like, well, clearly you're not, we're not a good fit for you. That could, because it's not working for you. You're unhappy with our work. So let us step away. And I think once or twice I've recommended somebody else, but I've also warned that person I'm referring them to what they're like. Or I'll just, depending on how they are, I'll just say there are plenty of others out there. Go to the NASM website, and I'll send you a link, something like that. And always document it, put it in an email. Yeah, okay, good for you guys who've had to fire them. And actually someone, I'm sorry, I missed your name. You mentioned that sometimes if you're not competent and or don't have the skill set for it. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to hoarding. Okay, back to our presentation. All right, so what's the value of your sanity? And what's the value of your time? We've all had them, those clients who get on the phone and want to talk for 2 hours. And then God forbid you charge them for that time, because it's project management time. And always make sure you charge for that time, because that is time you're not working with other clients or working on your business. And then also, what's the value of employee retention? It costs so much more to find and hire another employee than it does to keep them on board. And the thing is, remember that our work is exhausting enough without the mental stress, the psychological stress of people being constantly critical of you when you're working in the field, whether it's you or your staff, or somebody who is so indecisive and won't move forward. There are little tricks that you can use, and I'll get into those in a bit.
Hey, Marty, real quick, there's a request to check out how your slide presentation is showing. because I think
Okay, am I okay?
they,
Thank you. I'll stop sharing. Let me try this again. Thank you. I really
no
appreciate that.
problem.
It's okay. So let me do this one. Is that working? Hopefully it is. It should be full screen.
100% yes.
Oh, good. Thank you. Whoever asked about that, thank you very, very much. Because you don't know unless somebody says something. But keep in mind too, you are the business owner, so you're completely invested, but your employees may just get fed up no matter how wonderful they are, no matter how much they love the work generally. They may just get exhausted because remember, think about it. Our work is physically demanding, psychologically demanding, and you add the stress of being criticized at every turn, and it's frustrating. So bear that in mind because you want to keep them on board. So a big category is families at war with one another. And remember that their cruelty to them, to each other, and sometimes to I'll say you, and I'm meaning you and your staff. It's really about something else entirely. You can't fix decades of toxicity in a few days or the weeks that you're working with them. So often it's about each of them really wants to be heard and they want to win for some reason, some old grievance. I mean, we're all aware of this, right? Some old grievance they have, and they just want to, this is their chance to beat the other person up about it. And you can't fix that. And the trick is to really hold yourself separate from the discourse that's going on, the arguments that are going on. And what they say is the issue isn't the real issue. And we know that, it's old grievances. It can also simply be the stress of what they're going through. If somebody's passed away, they're clearing out the house, they are grieving. Not only that, but there's this laundry list of things that happen after someone dies. And in the grieving process, all that needs to be accomplished. Often there's quite a bit of money that they have to lay out for the funeral, for our services and things like that. And that can be worrying to them. And it comes out in all those ways and they'll direct it at one another. Again, hold yourself kind of separate in a way that you can take advantage of what I call the neutral party effect. This is when, how most people want to look better to a third party, look better than the other person who they're having an argument with, they'll behave a little bit better. So take advantage of that. Also, you'll need just take them one at a time, listen to what's going on and not in agreement, and be sympathetic, but don't say things that indicate you're taking their side. Because again, you need to remain neutral. And you can just say, I understand that must be very upsetting for you. Here's the thing. We're here to do a job and I need to be fair to both sides. Let me go hear what's going on the other side. And we'll get this done together. Don't you worry. And I've got your back. And then go to the other side and say similar things too. I've got your back. Because really you do have their backs mutually, because the whole goal is to do our job professionally and in a fair manner. And so it's easy to get, especially when you're new to this, it's easy to get caught up in those dynamics. And especially sometimes it's kind of clear, like one side, often when you have three siblings, there'll be two siblings who get along and are moving forward. And then there's the one sibling who really stirs the pot and makes trouble. So it's just a matter of, again, you have to kind of step back and be the observer, be the sympathetic observer. But again, you really can't take sides. And this is what it's like, right? When families are at war, it really feels like a tug of war. It's kind of ridiculous. And in these instances, above all, protect you and your staff. Train them, take the time to train them with case studies, scenarios, even, do some practice conversations so they get an understanding of the best way to communicate. And of course, ideally, for example, with my company, Clear Home Solutions, when someone is new to the company, they're always at a site with a project manager. And so it's really the project manager who's the experienced one and knows how to manage the client. And so the newer person can learn from them. But still, in the initial training, I discuss this so they're aware of it. And also with your staff, let them vent. we use Slack for team communication. And I remember one time, I've been doing this 10 years, so I got a lot of stories. But we had one of my project managers on site. There were two brothers he was dealing with, older, the adult children. And one of them just, I don't know, he was having he wanted to have a tug of war with my project manager. And it was driving my project manager crazy because he was being told how to do his job, which we, were talking about before the presentation started. And so my project manager was venting in at Slack. And so we were all just backing him up, supporting him. And I said, do you want me to give this guy a call? And he said, no, it just felt good to vent. So sometimes they, just like our clients vent, just how we need to vent sometimes. Listen to your employees, let them vent a bit. Also, a little verbal conversational trick is when the families are saying something like, well, mom promised that and that to me. You say, so your mother promised you that and that to you. And then you can ask questions like, when did she do that? Is it in writing? Things like that to try to get at the source and make them realize that make them hear what they're saying. Because this is kind of a negotiation that we're dealing with. We're kind of negotiating trying to keep the peace between the warring family parties. And there's a great book regarding negotiating called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And he was an expert FBI hostage negotiator. And he's got some great tips for how to negotiate and help the other party kind of see their predicament, if you know what I'm saying. And also, bear in mind that when the job is over, the tug of war ends. So you get to back out of it, and hopefully the siblings or the parent and child can find a way to make peace down the line. We can only hope, but that's not our purview. We're not in charge of that. That's their issue that they have to work out. But we can walk away. And sometimes I've reminded my staff about that. It's like, look, we've just got a week left on this project. We're almost there. We've got this, and then we're done. And that just helps everybody remember. It's like, okay, this is the work we do. This is why people need us. If they've got, I always say families and friends are our greatest competition. This is when they're getting along. But it's the people who can't get along or don't have other people to help them that really need our work. And we're going to have our very first code word. There's going to be two. The first code word is peace. When the tug of war ends, at least there's peace for us, we professionals, and it's up to the family. So peace, P-E-A-C-E. Now there's kind of a second part to this when families are at war. They're at war with dementia and other diseases, whether they realize it or not. They have memories about how their parents used to be and the things their parents used to do to bother them. And so it's really, they think they know how mom or dad should be. I remember somebody saying, and I heard this through one of my staff members, the son who was out of town was saying, oh, as soon as he gets there, I'm going to work with dad and you'll see he's going to get his memory back. Well, as we all know with dementia and Alzheimer's, it's the disease. That memory isn't coming back, which is very sad and hard to take. It's almost easier when it's a physical disease where you can see the deterioration. It's clear that mom or dad is getting much weaker and that they're diminishing in their physical capacity. And then even when that's coupled with something like dementia, it's a little easier for the family to grope with. But it's much more difficult when the body is healthy and it's their brain. It's the dementia, it's the disease, very difficult. One of the tricks we do, and I do, and I train my staff in this, is how to model good behavior for those who are around the people with dementia. I'll give you a good example. I think it was my second year in business. I was meeting for a consultation with a mother and daughter. Mother had, I want to say, middle stage dementia. And so during that hour I was with them, she asked the same question probably about 12 times. And that question was, When am I moving? How are we going to manage this?" And the first time she asked that, I said, "You're going to move a week from tomorrow, a week from Thursday. And I'm here because my company is going to handle all of the moving for you. We're going to pack everything up, et cetera, et cetera." And she said, "Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much." 5 minutes later, she asked the same question, and I saw the daughter kind of putting her hand on her mother's arm, like to stop her. Mother asked it really verbatim the same question, and I just answered cheerfully and in the moment with the same answer I'd given 5 minutes before, because you already know the answer. It's easy. And after I said that, she was like, "Oh, thank you. Aren't you a terrific person?" 5 minutes later, same question. I gave the same answer. And I noticed that the daughter was again trying to kind of keep her mother from asking it. But the fourth time that the mother asked the question and I was answering it, the daughter was completely comfortable because she realized that I understood what was going on and I knew how to handle it. And they seem to be a great mother-daughter pair. But maybe it's possible the daughter learned how to deal with it better by the way I was handling it. So we can model some good behavior for them. And remind other family members that it is the disease. It's not their loved one trying to manipulate them or upset them or anything like that. Remind them that their loved one is still in there somewhere. It may not be a parent, but they're in there. And especially if it's someone with dementia who gets agitated easily. Try playing music that they like, especially from when they were younger. And also, I love it when my staff kind of commiserates about what phrases or methods or approaches we're working with the person with dementia or the family member working with them too, that would work to keep the situation calmer. Sometimes it's an item. It's almost like a talisman. If the person with dementia is holding that, it keeps them calmer. So look for those kinds of opportunities. And above all, have compassion for all of them, the person with the disease and those around them, because it's just so hard to go through as I think many of us have seen and know, and sometimes in our personal lives, we know it as well. So that's families at war. Now it's when it gets personal and clients are at war with you and your company, and it can make you nuts. Just like families at war, it's really not you, it's them. Now, sometimes it is something where you made a mistake. There was a mistake, something happened, something broke. And that's when we take responsibility. But when it's not you and it's really them, it can be very difficult to deal with. For example, recently, actually, a care manager, an aging life care specialist, had referred a client to us. It was a clear out. And we were working with the daughter and a couple of her friends who'd flown in from out of town. And initially, the daughter was so happy with the work my staff did. And then later on, and I think one of the friends was kind of instigating this behind the scenes. Nevertheless, the daughter was hypercritical of the work that was done. And I was really concerned because, of course, we don't want to displease the client, but also because I was worried about this care manager, would she keep referring to us? And thankfully, we'd already worked with her. One of the first things I do is when I hear a complaint, I will first talk to my staff to get their version of things. And then I talk to the client and I just listen. And sometimes they just need to vent. And then I'll talk in a minute about when to say I'm sorry versus I regret. But in talking with them, listen, see where there might be something common, a common thread between what they're saying and what your staff said, and kind of focus on that. One of the things I noticed, particularly with that client, I mean, she just went off the rails because my staff had gone out. They were crawling on the floor, going into all these little cubby holes. They really knocked themselves out. So I called the care manager because I was worried about what she was thinking about her work. The thing is, she apologized to me. She says, "I know the daughter is so difficult." And something to keep in mind is usually everyone else who's working with that client knows exactly what they're like. So it's not really you. It's just the client, what they're going through, what their personality is like. And so for your own sanity, keep that in mind that everybody else knows what they're like. And they know they're experienced enough to know. And if it's just about, whoops, I'm so sorry. God. I knocked my mic over. Is it about poor service, whatever that may be? And again, it may not be the fault of your company, you or your staff, in which case I often say, I don't want to apologize really, because there's nothing that we really need to apologize for. But I'll say, I regret that you're feeling that way. Because I do regret that they're upset. I don't want them to be upset for any reason. If we have been the ones who messed something up and made a mistake, and after 10 years and Lord knows how many clients, mistakes are going to happen. It's a tiny percentage, but it happens. And that's when I apologize. I am so sorry. And don't give them oh, I'm sorry, but, or I'm sorry if, because I call those non-apology apologies. If you're going to apologize, mean it. Be contrite. Don't be one of those customer service people who goes, oh, I'm sorry that happened to you. And then blah, 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 because we all know that is not that's a script. It's not a sincere apology. And again, this is when you can use some of those, especially when it's obviously not on you, you did not make a mistake. Again, repeating back to them as a question. For example, well, they wouldn't go into this one cubby hole because, there were some rat droppings. So they wouldn't go into the cubby hole because there were rat droppings in there. And oftentimes there will just be silence because they're actually hearing what they're saying, and just let them sit in that silence and then wait for them to respond. And that can be very effective, I have found. All right. So let's talk about when clients at war and it gets serious, where this could be, especially when they're hypercritical, this is just time to what I call drop the rope and make them go away. This is when you fire them. I say drop the rope because it's a tug of war. That's really what's going on. Just drop the rope and respectfully walk away. Make sure it's in an email or some other way that it is documented. So you have that. I always say document once you realize you have a difficult client, document everything. There's a situation we're dealing with. We've been working on this particular case since 2019. And it was two siblings who got along. Initially, we're doing a home inventory. And then a couple of years back, a couple of years later in 2021, when they finally settled things by staying up till 3 a.m. with their attorneys, we were finally dealing with the other problematic sibling. And in one of the first emails to us, she threatened to sue us. We hadn't even done any work for them yet. It was just, that's her nature. And that's when I just started saving all the emails, everything like that, because you just never know what could happen. And if it's about money, sometimes it's better to just offer a discount and walk away. Again, document it. Make sure there's an email that explains, yes, I'm giving you this discount, so that they don't come back and say, oh, you didn't give me enough of a discount. Well, this is what we agreed to. And make sure that they do email you back to agree to it. Again, documenting, so important, especially when it gets legal. And that situation I was talking about before, we did indeed get sued for no reason. And it's something we're dealing with. I'm in California and Los Angeles, where, in general, around in the US, people can sue for any reason they want to. And that happens a lot here. And this is when insurance is your best friend. Errors and omissions in case something gets broken, or they say it was lost, or God forbid, stolen. Also workers' compensation, because you want people who work for you and do this work need to be your employees. I cannot emphasize that enough. And it's a whole other seminar. But your workers can slip in the homes and then sue both the client and your company. And so this is important in order to keep your clients happy. And then there's also general liability. General liability can be when people sue you for, it's not about something was lost or broken. It's more about if they charge you with, I don't know, defamation or fraud, like, or something like that, where it's more of it's not related to objects. Let me put it that way. This is where all this insurance comes in handy. So I know it's an investment, but when you need it, you really, really need it, because sometimes people sue because they know you don't want to have to pay for an attorney. And so they just expect you to write a check. So insurance can really be your best friend. And this goes back to what's the value of your sanity, your time, and your employee retention. Now let's talk about hoarding and other difficult circumstances. That is a hoard, that photo. That's a hoard we cleared out, and it was really something special. The most important thing is, if you're not trained to work with a hoarding situation, and especially with a person who hoards, hand that job off to someone who is. Simply explain to them, I don't have training for this and it needs proper training. Here, introduce them to a company that does. Because when you're dealing with a person who hoards, it really involves special skills, I want to say conversational skills, to know how to help persuade them to let go of things. Patience, I often tell, especially if it's a fiduciary, that's what we have in California, a conservator, a guardian. So in other words, like an estate or a trust is paying for the work. And whoever is in charge of those funds, I'll explain, it's like that the first, and sometimes a good chunk of the second session, nothing may really get sorted or thrown out or anything. We are building trust. And it's about making sure that they know we respect where they are. We're not judging them in at all. And to give you an idea, back when I was working in the field, I was working with a client who it wasn't a huge hoard, but she was definitely sentimentally attached to her items. And I remember I had told her I was not going to throw anything out without her permission. And there was a dust bunny, and I picked it up. And I asked her, can I throw this out? And she giggled and she said, of course, Marty. I said, well, I just want to prove I'm not throwing anything out without asking you. And she appreciated that. That kind of thing builds trust. And you have to be patient with them, because realize that their brains are built differently than yours is. Their executive function is different. I mean, I don't want to go into all the things about, training for hoarding situations, but their executive function is different, and they don't perceive how dangerous the situation is. I had a situation not too long ago with someone we'd been working with on and off for years, who was a hoarder and really could not perceive how bad her conditions were. We would have to go in every so often when she would let us in the door to once again deal with their hoarding. And I had new staff members who had not yet dealt with a hoarding situation, though no, they had, I take it back, they had. But they went in, and this woman had a cat. She'd had multiple cats. Now she was down to one, and the cat had mange. I mean, there were issues with the cat because the client didn't know, could not perceive how to take care of the cat and what condition the cat was in. And my staff became judgmental of her because of that. And so I had to explain to them that it's not her fault. She really cannot perceive that she's hurting the cat. She can't perceive that. She feels like she's loving the cat in a proper way. So reminding people that whatever situation it is, because it might not be a full-on hoarding situation, but it's people who are attached to things, or they have a couple of packed closets and or rooms or they're sentimentally attached, that it requires patience, and realize these people have been criticized a lot, and just getting them to have them tell the stories, listen to them, because that's been a big issue for them their whole lives, people probably being dismissive of their attachment to items. And especially if you are working directly with a person who hoards, if you don't have training in how to work with a person who hoards, definitely, without question, hand that off, because sometimes you have to be able to realize when you really need to get a therapist involved. Because oftentimes when it's somebody with hoarding disorder, it is a mental illness in the latest DSM-5. I don't think DSM-6 has come out yet, but it is its own disorder. They really can't perceive what they're doing is a problem. And a therapist who specializes in hoarding really knows how to work with them in a mental and psychological way. And you can then be dealing with their stuff while in concert with the therapist. Things that people you will encounter. And again, train your staff with this. The smell of cat pee, it's all that ammonia. It's really difficult. One of the tricks I learned, thank you, Matt Paxton, for teaching me this. One of the tricks, I think those of us who were working before the pandemic, we already knew what PPE is. But with a mask, I have my project managers carry a couple of different essential oils in their kits so that people can choose what they like most. I don't know why Matt likes tea tree oil. I can't stand the smell. Give me peppermint or something like that. But you can put a few drops of essential oil in the mask and it'll help ameliorate the cat pee smell or other smells like must or whatever. Also, even if it's a tidy house, I remember working with actually, we were on the show Inside Edition, and this is a friend of mine that she's a realtor. And in the garage, we were doing a thing about cleaning out your garage, a segment. And as we were moving some things around, we discovered some rat droppings. She was just mortified. And she's an immaculate person. So you never know when you can find evidence of vermin. And I have a clause in our contract stating that if we encounter vermin of any kind, that we need to stop our work, back out, and send in an exterminator or something like that, or someone like that to take care of the problem. Because it becomes dangerous. Rat droppings, when they're old, they crumble and turn to dust and get inhaled. And that is so dangerous for everybody, including the client that you're working with. Sometimes you encounter dead animals. There was one situation, it wasn't a hoarding situation. It was somebody had passed away and they were living with someone, I can't remember if it was a relative, but they had really not gone to that part of the house, into the room that the person had been living in because they were grieving. Unfortunately, a cat had gotten locked in the closet and the cat had died. I just don't even imagine what happened. It's awful to imagine what happened, but that was horrifying for my staff on site. And so talking them through that, but they knew enough to not be really judgmental and really to comfort the client who was so upset about it. Again, this is when we have to realize it's really our client's emotions that we're managing. We already have to be managing our own. So be ready for that. It's tough when you first encounter it. It's not like you don't react to it. That's understandable. But really work with our clients and try not to be judgmental. And again, train your staff for these sorts of things. Now, other difficult circumstances, elder abuse. Now, there are different kinds of elder abuse. There's financial elder abuse. Just a moment, please. There we go, another technical difficulty. There's financial elder abuse, abuse of credit cards. It could be a family member, like one of the brothers. I remember hearing about that. He got his mother to write I think it was a $75,000 check to him. The mother only had like $105,000 in savings. And of course, that brother absconded with the check and nobody could get a hold of him. So there's that going on. Now, here's the tricky thing for us is we are not mandatory responders. So if there's an attorney who's also working with the client or a camera manager or someone else you can mention this to who would be a mandatory reporter, mention this to them. If not, just make sure you document it. Have your staff member email you so you have that on record, because you never know, somebody down the line, because the brother ran off with the money. The mother obviously wrote the check willingly. Was she in her stable mind? Who knows at the time? But this way you have it documented so we knew about it, but we're not mandatory reporters. Then there's also mental and emotional abuse. And this is when hypercritical clients who berate us, they berate their older parent. This is very distressing, and it's awful, obviously, for the older parent, especially if they have dementia. This goes back to the families at war with one another and doing your best to manage the emotions, step in as an intermediary. If there's another family member or an attorney or another professional working with them who you can mention this to, that's a good thing. Again, document it so it's clear it was understood and you were identifying it and notifying people where you could, especially those who are mandatory reporters. Now, when it comes to physical abuse, this is visible abuse. It can be reported to the police. If you're concerned about this, when you see things like black eyes, they didn't walk into the door. Bruising on the arms and limbs, and especially if there's some kind of caregiver living there, whether it's a hired caregiver or it's what I call a QFM, questionable family member. When you see physical abuse, report it. Call the police, have them check on it, or adult family services. That's what we have in Los Angeles County. So look locally for your own adult services governmental department and report it to them. It can be visible injuries. It could also be not feeding them or hydrating them with medications, giving them improper doses, or not holding out on giving them, say, pain medication until they do what that caregiver wants them to do. Things like that are very punishing. It can be, it might be neglect, it might not be. Another one that's really problematic can be disfigurement. This was a surprising client that I ended up having to go visit. It's pre-pandemic, but not long before the pandemic. A reverse mortgage specialist told me that she was living in a very dirty hoarding situation and that it needed to be cleared up in order to get the reverse mortgage. And he said that there's some sort of disfigurement on her face. Like, okay. So I got my face, I got myself ready for that. And I walked in and I was not prepared for what I saw, which was in the middle of her face. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so I can actually show you. So right here in the middle of her face, right here, to the inner corners of her eyes, from about the bridge of her nose down to right above her lips, all that was missing. I was seeing directly into her skull. And that was, I cannot be, to say it's disconcerting does not begin to describe my reaction. At the same time, I didn't want her to think I was disgusted with her, but I walked in and I know there was a shocked look on my face initially. And then I took and then I got my poker face back on as fast as I could. The problem is the human brain is built to see faces. And so when a face is lacking something, or I remember an old ad for Absolute Vodka where there were actually two sets of eyes, one on top of the other. It was on a billboard. It was so weird to look at because it really threw you off, because our bodies, our brains are made from an evolutionary standpoint to see two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. And so with this big gap missing in the middle of her face and one eye was not working, I had to figure out a way to look at her, because another thing that was happening inside me was I was getting a little nauseous. And I wasn't so much nauseous because of what I saw, like looking into her skull. But as you can tell, I'm reliving this and it still is a bit discombobulating. It was that there was cognitive dissonance going on in my brain. So I figured out, okay, I would look into her good eye. And that's what I did. I talked to her through her good eye. And as I went around, and so I settled into it and it was working. And the thing is, I hate to think when the last time was that she had actually gone outside, because think of what things would have said or how people would have reacted. She ended up being so sweet and having this lovely sense of humor. And I was so glad I got to experience that with her. But things like that can happen. And so that's something to think about and maybe talk it to your staff about, just things to consider, because you never know what you're walking into. All right. Let's start summarizing all of this. Qualities you need when you're dealing with any difficult or challenging client or situation. Patience, especially with family and client wars. This too will pass. And just this is when you have to be great at listening. I would say listen more, talk less. Let them talk it through and see where you can make some inroads. Compassion, especially with it's an illness like dementia or a physical circumstances like a hoarding situation or like the story I just told you. And then remember finality. When the job's done, thankfully, you're done with them. They can walk away and hopefully with your sanity intact, even legally, like this legal thing we're dealing with, it's going to go away and it's not going to be a problem for us. But we have to deal with it, but it will go away. And hopefully you'll still have your sanity and your staff intact. All right. Questions and comments. And even more importantly, the second code word, which is sanity. 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 All right. Questions, comments.
Thank
I'll stop sharing.
you. Awesome. I do have a few questions for you, Marty.
Wonderful.
So, one of the questions I wonder is, have you ever had a scenario with clients that shouldn't be driving, and maybe they're the adult kids, haven't had that conversation with them, maybe they have, and how to navigate that?
All right. First of all, document it. If it's you, write an email maybe to the adult child and just say, look, I noticed your parents driving, but my concern is their eyesight isn't good. They have dementia. The hearing loss is bad. What if they couldn't hear a siren? And always when like in the perspective of they could hurt somebody else or they could get hurt. Sometimes the adult child is recalcitrant, but at least make sure you have it documented, because honestly, you can't make the adult child talk to their parent, which is difficult. And it's really not up to you. Unfortunately, you can't, the law is so gray in this area. Unfortunately, they are starting to give DMV tests for people who are older than, I want to say 85. I can't remember. I'm not at 85 yet. I should know this. I got to remember that number. But you can, if there are ways to gently speak with them, especially if you build up a great rapport with them and you can express concern, that can help. Also, if they're drinking or if they're on medication, same thing. Just make sure it's documented somewhere so that you've been aware of it. And if you've discussed it, document that you spoke with them about it. Email, either have your staff email you about it or just add it to the client notes and make sure, make a record of when you did it. Because just in case something does happen, you can say, I was aware of this. I expressed it to the adult. I expressed it to the daughter and nothing was done, because really it's not, you can't take away the keys because that's really stealing from them. So you can't do that because they're legally in charge of themselves. It's a fine line. And I know it's frustrating, especially when you see disaster on the horizon. I get that. What you can do is speak to the children. If there are some other professionals that they're working with, you can express that to them too. Maybe an attorney can put more pressure on the kids or even the client, and they'll listen to the attorney more. We know how people don't take our services as seriously as they ought to. They don't realize the amount of training that we go through and the expertise we have, but they sometimes will listen to an attorney simply because they have a law degree from somewhere.
Makes sense. So, Kirsten has a question. How much do you, as the owner, handle most difficult conversations, or do you allow or have the lead on site do it?
Oh, well, definitely my project managers are empowered. I've got the best staff I've ever had. They are empowered to handle those situations on site. They'll often discuss it. We use Slack. I think I mentioned we use Slack for team communication. And so there'll be kind of a discussion going on Slack. And I do read all the Slack messages just so I know what's going on. And especially when somebody's had a hard day, I'll say something, or somebody did something special, just so that they know that I'm there. But especially when I see something like something very difficult is going on, I can chime in and I'll make some suggestions about turns of phrase, or I'll offer to call myself. But yeah, you want to hire people who you feel comfortable empowering in the field. And hiring properly is a whole other seminar. But yeah, ideally. But what I'll do too is I'll say, okay, let's play good cop and bad cop, because we had that again recently with another client. And it was a situation where the estimate was for 17 hours of work. The client wanted it done in 7. And it took a total of 10 hours, which was a lot less than 17, but he didn't want to pay for more than 7 hours. And so we went back and forth, and I told my project manager, Tina, you be the good cop, you explain to him why this was additional work that he asked for and the estimate, et cetera. And then I'll play bad cop, which I did. And it worked out very well. It was all good. But yeah, that's a good way to play it too. Sometimes I always want my project managers on site to be the good cops, because I want their relationship with the client to be as strong as possible. And they know I am here to come in as the bad cop if need be.
Perfect. So, Susan, just to piggyback on the driving
Yeah.
discussion, she
Yeah.
said, "What if there are no adult children to report to?" And Bev said, "Yes, I have a client who had a stroke over a year ago and is back driving despite slow processing. And unfortunately, her medical consultant worked through it with her." So I don't know.
Wow, that medical consultant is kind of leaving themselves wide open for something. It's amazing with the driving and also with dementia, where the medical people, the doctors, whatever, don't want to give a diagnosis or say no. I think it's one of the things that probably makes us all nuts. And we see the problem with it. Um, it's difficult if that client has an attorney or another professional they're working with. You can talk to them about it. Again, you can't take the car keys away, because again, you'd be stealing from them, you know? Um, and you can discuss it with them carefully. If you have that, you want to make sure you have good rapport. And I suppose you could report it to the DMV. I don't know how much Department of Motor Vehicles. I don't know how much they can do either. Again, it's a very gray area in terms of law. I feel for you guys. I feel for all of you who are encountering that situation. See if there's some other professional or a dear friend or someone you can talk to, their sibling, something like that. Or like I say, a very dear friend, and just say, what can we do? And chances are the friend has probably tried to talk to them too. Um,
One
I feel,
idea is church type congregations, if you know
oh,
that they are very involved with some sort of congregation, they
mhm.
often have volunteers there that do things like, I think one thing is called like Stephen's Ministry or something, where they will volunteer to reach out to older members of their congregation to support them. That's one idea that I've seen done.
Well, also, yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. Places of worship. You can tell I'm a very lapsed Presbyterian. I don't remember the last time I went to church. But with any place of worship, um, the leader of that place of worship is someone who, presumably, if they're a regular service attender, they will respect and listen to. So if you have a way of talking to that person, or even as you just mentioned, Heather, contacting that place of worship and talking them through this, can people offer to drive them? Because sometimes that's it too. They don't, especially this older generation that was either I call them the deprivation generation. They lived through the Depression and or World War II, or they were born right after it, where all that fear and tension that their parents experienced was put on them too. They were not allowed to be a burden. So this stroke victim may not want to ask for help or doesn't trust people to help them, or they're embarrassed. Frequently, that's it too. They don't want to admit that they have a problem. But if you can approach a place of worship or, like I said, a dear friend or something like that, and have that person approach them and offer to drive them. And not necessarily saying, I don't want you to drive, let me drive you, but saying, hey, let's do that together. I need to get some things from the grocery store too. Or it'd be fun to hang out with you. Something like that, where it's really not, I don't want you to drive, but rather, I'm going to spend some time with you. So think maybe those are some approaches that you can use.
Yes, perfect. And Lauren said senior centers will have counselors, supportive volunteers are embedded into those community resources. So
And also here in Los Angeles, we have what's called Access Transit. And so they will come pick up people and take them to the places they need to go. So that's a possibility too.
awesome. So another question is about red flags. What to maybe look for, or your staff could look for, just in case. I remember one time being on site as an organizer, and I noticed the client wasn't eating. Like we had gotten there at like 8:30 in the morning, right? And then it's 3, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't think I saw Mrs. Smith eat a morsel all day. You know what I mean? And then I knew to call the daughter. So what are
Yeah.
some of the red flags to keep an eye out for?
Well, that's a perfect one right there. They're not eating. They're driving when they shouldn't be. Obviously, rat vermin, or if you're seeing a lot of cobwebs, because that'll indicate some infestation. If they threaten to sue you in the first couple of times you're having to deal with them, that's a red flag. If also, another thing is, if they're having a problem with mobility, like they're leaning on all the chairs and the walls and things, but they refuse to use their walker, or they don't even have one, or they don't have a cane. I mean, that's a concern about falling. And so you might talk to them about that. Or if they're not using the cane or walker or wheelchair, you might say, hey, take it easy. Why don't you just use this? That way, I don't know about you, but I get tired all the time. I'm a bit tired myself. I'd like to borrow that walker, and just say, why don't you use that while you're getting around with me? So that, because when you're making all these decisions, that's hard enough. You're going to be so tired. Make it easy on your body while you're making all these mental decisions. Again, think of them as people. Let me put it this way. How would you, imagine being in their situation and being proud, and again, not having been allowed to be a burden. Imagine being that person. How would you like it to be addressed with you as you're imagining that? That's the compassion part and the empathy part.
Perfect. We are almost at the end of the hour. I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
I do want everybody to know first that Marty did do a presentation last year about hoarding, and I can share that recording upon request if anybody would like.
Oh, I remember that was, I think it's, is it hoarding or just clutter? Yeah.
It was, you covered like all of it. It was awesome. Everybody is saying thank you so much. I don't know if there's a final code word to share before we go.
Oh, right. Yeah. And they were both in the presentation.
Okay, perfect.
First code word was peace, P-E-A-C-E. The second one was sanity, S-A-N-I-T-Y. Things we both seek when we're working with clients. And often that is what we feel and they feel when they're working with us. It's that small percentage that eat up so much of your time. And often their behavior is not setting themselves up for success with you, because when they're picky, you're thinking so hard about so many different things and trying to keep track of what they're complaining about, that mistakes can happen. And that's enormously frustrating. So again, document.
Awesome. I am going to put my email in the chat. Please do request the certificate of attendance.
And I'm also going to put my
Awesome.
information up in case you have any direct questions to me. So you can email me, or if you want to listen to my podcast, you can do that too. But yeah, if you have any questions afterwards, just email me, call, what have you, whatever's best for you.
There was not a third code word, Mackenzie. There were two.
Just the two: peace, PEACE, excuse me, and sanity, SANITY.
Awesome. All right. That is a wrap. Thank you so much, Marty. This was great.
My pleasure. And thank you, Heather, for the honor of doing this with MaxSold. And also thank all of you who attended. I really appreciate your time and your attention. I hope it was helpful.
It was. Thank you.